When dealing with children, schizophrenics, or people with obsessive compulsive disorder, it obviously makes little sense to just expect them to be more rational or demand that they be more rational. If a 3-year-old is yelling about how he wants his mommy now, it might not do any good to talk to him like a rational person and say, your mommy's at work and she'll be home in an hour. Don't yell about how you want your mommy. She's at work. It doesn't matter how much you yell. That's not going to make your mommy come home any sooner. Wait an hour. Yeah, if you do that, the child will respond, I want my mommy now. Mommy, mommy. You can't counter like you're being irrational right now. You're being irrational right now. Stop being irrational. If a schizophrenic is presenting a bizarre theory on how the government is controlled by aliens from Neptune, and he backs it up with a completely ridiculous analysis of Britney Spears' posture on the cover of her latest album, it might not do much good to talk to him like a rational person and say, your theory makes no sense for these reasons, and your analysis makes no sense for these reasons. If you say something like that, he'll just come back with another round of arguments backing up his ideas, and making you seem like the irrational one. Another round of arguments backing up his ideas and making you seem like the irrational one. If a person with OCD is intent on hoarding junk in his apartment, washing his hands 18 times before each meal, and walking around his TV 3 times an hour, it might not do any good to talk to him like a rational person and say, the collectibles taking up half of your apartment are clearly just an assortment of dirty, worthless, commonly found items that 99.9% of people would throw away immediately. Washing your hands 18 times before meals is a waste of time and effort. Walking around the TV 3 times an hour is pointless. Yeah, if you tell him that non-stop, it still might not alter his obsessions and his compulsive behavior at all. When someone is completely unfamiliar with children, schizophrenics, and people with OCD, then he comes across one, he might take the you're wrong and here's why approach. But when people regularly deal with 3-year-old schizophrenics and those with OCD, they often get a good sense of how they should adapt to behavior, tendencies, and beliefs that might be far from rational. They don't stubbornly persist in thinking, this person should accept what I'm saying and go along with what I consider to be rational. Instead, they deal with each of those individuals based on who they are, and they seek out alternate means of influencing them. They don't have a 10-minute long back and forth conversation with the 3-year-old. They go something like, your mommy will be home in an hour. I want my mommy now. She's at work. I want my mommy. She has things she needs to do at work, etc. Instead, they say something like, do you want to watch SpongeBob? Or, show me the picture you drew today. Or, can you count to 100? Of course, schizophrenics and people with OCD are much more difficult to actually persuade and manipulate. Nevertheless, instead of merely arguing with them about what's right and what makes sense, people often seek to listen to them, get a sense of what the root issue is, and find some way to better adapt to the person and possibly alter his behavior. The point is, although we often do an adequate job of adapting to people like that, it's far less common for us to adapt to people in general. When a 3-year-old is in his I want my mommy now state, we don't argue with him about it. But when an adult is wrongly disputing an item on his bill, we often just go ahead and argue with him instead of seeking out alternatives that better deal with who a person really is and what he really wants. When someone presents a very bizarre, highly irrational view, it's not uncommon for others to debate with him and present a fairly standard line of reasoning. They often go very far in doing so, even after observing the person defend his views with the most absurd logic. It's interesting just how much people will persist in debating someone who's being like that. And they often do so with some sort of expectation that the person will in fact be persuaded and change his mind. The irony is that although the other person is being absurdly irrational to an extreme degree, the people debating with him are also being irrational and by expecting him to be persuaded. What's more irrational and absurd? One person's irrational, absurd beliefs, or the belief that we can change his mind by saying, your belief is irrational, and here's why. In a certain sense, expecting the other person to change his views due to a standard line of reasoning is as irrational as the views themselves.